As we move away from FNAF's 10th anniversary and rocket towards the spooky season, it wasn't a surprise to me when I started to consume a lot more horror content. However, the quantity I've been reading, watching, and creating has far exceeded every other year. I'm so obsessed with everything horror right now, especially the works of my two favorite horror creators, H.P. Lovecraft and Junji Ito. Reading and rereading their stories in such close proximity to FNAF's anniversary gave me a brilliant idea. Mascot horror, the genre kickstarted by FNAF, is and always has been under scrutiny for not being scary. But how can we properly judge that? Does it need to be scary? I decided the fun way to answer that would be taking what I consider the best horror creators and analyzing what makes them scary. Then I compare it directly to the two best Mascot horror franchises and see what they do right and what they do wrong. But first, I think I should share my thoughts on horror so you know where I'm coming from. Oh, before we actually continue, I've been informed by multiple sources that being a good YouTuber means I need to shill and ask every single one of you to like, subscribe, and enjoy the video. It really helps the vid reach more people and navigate the algorithm easier. Thank you, and let's actually continue. To me, horror is a sibling genre to comedy. Like yin and yang both oppose each other but are littered with similarities and reflections. What's important to think about right now is their variety. What one person considers funny/scary can be completely different for another. It is true both have a baseline definition, but say you ask someone what the funniest thing is. The likelihood that it doesn't match your answer or get anywhere near it is tremendous. It's the same for horror, and a lot of people fail to realize it. I'm someone that's hard to scare through media. I don't mean that in some overconfident way. I've just been so exposed to the genre that I feel more amazement than fear. However, there is a type of horror that really spooks me. When I'm reading, playing, or watching something that adds me into an unavoidable, unwinnable situation, something that builds so much tension and fear that it keeps me from wanting to continue, usually involves something akin to the supernatural, making the unwinnable feeling that much stronger as I lack any understanding of the situation. It really leaves me with something to chew on and keeps me thinking, creating even more horror as I theorize and speculate the reality of what I just viewed. Now, I know this genre isn't for everyone. Different strokes for different folks. I've even heard some people say this isn't real horror. The best example I have of this comes from the release of Longlegs, a fairly good horror movie that was released recently and left me with a lot to think about. The overarching mystery kept me tense as I watched, and the reveal made me rethink every previous moment of the film. It didn't necessarily scare me, but I could easily see the horror in the situations throughout the movie. However, the same thing can't be said about many people online talking about the film. A lot of people felt disappointed by the horror label on the film, stating it was a movie that built suspense and tension through the runtime and kept you involved in the mystery. But it wasn't a horror movie because it didn't directly scare them. Oddly enough, when you ask these people what the scariest movie is, they reply with the Insidious franchise. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. Jokes aside, this is a perfect example of the different shades of horror, and an even better segue into another type of horror. The jump scare is a fantastic tool used by horror creators to build tension, fear, and establish what viewers are in for. For me, these are the best ways to use jump scares. They are naturally a cheap scare, so not bombarding people with them keeps it from getting stale. However, some horror viewers don't feel the same way. To some people, the adrenaline of getting jump scared is horror. There's nothing wrong with this, of course. If it scares you, then you are getting exactly what you signed up for. All of this is to say, I don't think things can inherently be labeled scary or not scary. But this isn't going to derail the video, so let's continue and find out exactly what makes Lovecraft's work scary. Now, I'm gonna try my damnedest not to talk about Lovecraft for hours, so I will go over the mere basics to keep myself from talking endlessly. First of all, his work created a brand new genre and overall philosophy that has continually been applied to writing, and even real-world occult and branches of philosophy. His genre of work was later coined as cosmicism/cosmic horror. It's very similar to nihilism with its view of the world. In his stories, the horror usually derives from the idea that we are small and worthless in the grand scheme of things. In this infinite cosmos of unknown possibilities, what makes us special? If a god does exist, what's to say they pay any attention to us? Do they hear our cries and see it as a nuisance? This idea that you could devote your entire being to religion only to meet the true God and see something completely alien, something that doesn't even know you exist, that is true terror. Even outside of a religious sense, the idea that everything we think we know about the universe is dead wrong is staggering. If we are nothing more than the results of sheer luck, not even being the most impressive species to walk this planet as shown in At the Mountains of Madness, then what is our purpose? What is the point of living? Basically, Lovecraft loves to challenge our existentialism with concepts and creatures barely comprehensible. Lovecraft also amplified this with his mastery of presentation and language. Going back to At the Mountains of Madness, the story starts out almost like a documentary. The amazing use of geological lingual greatly immerses you, making the later and quickly snowballing findings and reveals that much more impactful. When he talks about an ancient advanced city older than any human located in the Antarctic, you feel the immense weight as if it was a real news report. There's a lot more I could add, of course, but I think this sums it up perfectly for now. If you want more info, I recommend reading his stories for yourself. And if you just don't want to, I linked an amazing interview with an equally talented writer, Alan Moore. If I'm able to convince just one person to read either Lovecraft or Junji Ito, then this video will be a complete success. So comment below if I had any effect. Anyway, speaking of Junji Ito, now, I have even more notes about Junji Ito, and I don't think I could realistically go over every single one of them. I do have a video about a certain series of his plans, so I will be going into further depth there. Anyways, Junji's work is very special. He follows very few rules set by previous horror mangakas. His stories lack antagonists, deep characters, and exposition. Instead, they focus on unexplainable, unavoidable horrors that derive from human emotions and actions. The best example being the multiple interpretations of the Enigma of Amagara Fault. On one hand, the story represents the death drive, which is the theory that humans have a natural fascination with bringing death upon themselves. You know how sometimes you'll go on a hike and be standing on the edge of a cliff, then you get a sudden compulsion to jump? This theory aims to answer why we do that, and the story represents that with the townsfolk's compulsion to enter the holes. Even when it starts morphing them, their morbid curiosity and drive continuously pushes them forward. And on the other hand, one could correlate the story with the idea of conformity. These holes popped up for the townspeople to morph them into an acceptable citizen. I would be surprised if everyone watching this didn't understand that feeling. The feeling that you must change yourself to fit in. To be accepted by your peers, you need to keep pushing yourself until you transform into something completely different. Something you didn't choose to be. These horrors have no in-universe explanation, but we as the viewers get to see their parallels with the real world and relate on a deeper level. This is amplified by Junji's admittedly very bland characters. And while this would be a huge negative for any other writer, for Junji it's a positive. It makes it easier for us to surrogate ourselves into the stories, on top of heavily relating to the deeper themes, leading to immersion unlike anything else. And of course, I've left out arguably the most important part of Junji's horror, his immaculate drawings and panels. I'm sure just putting a few panels on screen will get the idea across. But another aspect that's just as important is where Junji places these artworks. Usually the build-up to a page like this will involve zoomed-in shots of the characters reacting, then forcing you to flip the page and see for yourself what's about to happen. It adds a layer of interactiveness as you are the one bringing the horror forward. All in all, I could talk about Junji all day. His work is marvelous in every sense of the word. Oh, well, that wraps up both of them. Now it's time to look at what we learned and apply it to Mascot horror. I bet you forgot what this video was really about. I know I sure did. Anyway, how this is gonna work. Here are the key points we talked about for each person's work. This is what allows their stories to stand the test of time and truly horrify people. One last thing I want to mention is Lovecraft and Junji Ito's mastery of their art form. Lovecraft's linguistics can absorb anyone into any story he's crafting. The words bring out such vividly horrifying terrors in your imagination, forcing you to hope and pray they stay there. Junji, on the other hand, has mastered his art and style, also having complete understanding of paneling, allowing him to scare you with the very simple act of a page flip. Both of these writers are, were for one of them, very comfortable with their style and writing, allowing them to provide the best stories and work they can. When trying to find the two best Mascot horror series, it was easy picking the first one. Of course, it's Five Nights at Freddy's. However, the second was a massive toss-up. I had to take into effect many different things, and I came out with the belief that Poppy's Playtime is the second best mainstream Mascot horror game. Please don't sue me for that. With that, we will be diving into FNAF with the previous points in mind. I will start by saying FNAF is the only Mascot horror series that has given me the type of horror I crave, as mentioned in the beginning. When I first booted up FNAF VR, I imagined a fun adventure I would play around and joke with. However, what I got was a spine-chilling terror as the low ambient noises and setting as a whole sank in. I didn't want to continue moving and playing, fearing a foreign jump scare appearing right in my face. It reminded me of the time I played the Resident Evil 7 demo. I was so startled and scared that I had to set my controller down and walk around my room. Both happened a long time ago, but I feel it's important to mention for the presentation of horror. I would say for the most part, FNAF has a great understanding of what it is. Its wacky titles embracing that nature, and the older titles holding up its horror experiences when factoring out how overexposed we all have become to it. Of course, FNAF also shares a point with Lovecraft. It is the series that started and popularized Mascot horror, just like Lovecraft's creation of cosmic horror. A lot of the horror I explained earlier comes from the fear of the unknown, something FNAF has in its favor when the series launched due to its uniqueness and genre-creating concept. This fear of the unknown is perfectly represented by Junji's catalog, as each story shows you a barely explained horror, one that stays unexplained forever. And that's kind of where the direct comparisons end. And for Poppy's, the first chapter has some unsettling imagery, an overall unsettling tone, and the amazing ending sequence. But it vanishes so quickly. I wouldn't be comfortable giving it any of the points Lovecraft or Junji have. So, is that it? Is our question answered? Is Mascot horror scary? Well, the answer is no, but that's not where the video ends. Not yet. I love Mascot horror, I really do. FNAF set me on this horror journey and has been very important to me, but it comes with a lot of negatives, and even more for the series that followed after it. This series can have amazing tones and settings, but the horror is all based on the jump scares within the game. And like I explained earlier, jump scares best used to assist other elements of horror, not as the main allure. The staleness from an over-reliance on jump scares has had a very poor effect on the older games, making it so anyone can face tank a jump scare unfazed. Although many of these titles start with a wave of mystery, they all fall down the rabbit hole of explaining and even over-explaining things that would be better if left up to the viewer's imagination, taking a more story-focused approach but sacrificing a great deal of horror. Further, FNAF 1's biggest strength was its mastery of horror of the mundane, which is a horror practice in which you aim to turn the known into the unknown. This of course comes from the realistic animatronic designs. They feel accurate to real life and something you would actually see in a Chuck E. Cheese. We know what these are and what they do, but once they start moving and acting in these unknown ways, it's very unsettling. And even then, after this game, all the designs stopped subscribing to this practice. I mean, at one point, is it too much? Like the nightmares. These are so far away from the first game's uncanny creepiness that's kind of funny to look at. And other series like Poppy's also fail in this regard. I would say Huggy is a fairly realistic looking mascot, but after him, the idea goes out the window. Again, look at all these. No company would ever be allowed to advertise this to kids, especially this one. It breaks all immersion. This genre originated with FNAF, so naturally most series after it took heavy inspiration from it. However, this itself is a big negative, as many new series just feel like copies of each other, each trying to one-up each other or competing for the greediest developers. Well then, why is this video still continuing? How can I still say I love Mascot horror? It's really simple actually. I don't love this genre for its horror. I love it for everything else. I believe Mascot horror is at its best when you remove the horror. For these series to actually make strides in the horror department, they need to move away from marketing to children. Embrace its underutilized, unique horrors like the mix of flesh and machine, i.e. Springtrap. However, this is never gonna happen, and the few scares this series actually has clash with their individuality. Hence why I believe we need to move away from it. And I think most creators already are. If you look at the highly controversial Garten of Banban, it's moved away from the horror story to a psychedelic mess of randomness. And I think it's so much more enjoyable this way. Mainline FNAF strives with its challenges and challenging modes. It's also moved past a singular genre and expanded itself, allowing all types of creators to create with the IP. Poppy's is moving towards a graphically impressive puzzle game with an overarching story, Bendy's is a BioShock clone, and even Hello Neighbor is letting go of the idea of horror in favor of a stylish, thrilling puzzle game. And it's got a damn funny speedrun because of that. While none of these series are amazing and even farther from actual horror, I much prefer each taking its own unique path and trying something new. So again, would I say Mascot horror is scary? No. And I don't think it ever will be. But it doesn't have to. The genre is at its best when small, unnamed developers get the chance to create something new, being given an opportunity to show off their talent, then branching out and getting to freely express themselves. And I think that's just as meaningful. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed the video. I have a lot more horror-related content planned, so make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can catch that. Also, as you can see, I have a Patreon where you can get exclusive behind-the-scenes look at vids and your shiny name up here on the end screen. With that, I hope you all have a lovely day, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye!